welcome back as we continue our celebrations around World Chocolate Day. But it also gives us a moment to pause and reflect on our guilty pleasures. And I think all of us have at least one thing that fits into that bracket. Earlier we learned how chocolate can actually be very healthy for you in moderation. But what happens when late night snacking becomes an indulgence? Are your guilty pleasures good or bad, maybe in moderation? Well, we've got counseling psychologist Thomas Geffen here to tell us a little bit about the space, but how to know when we've gone too far, possibly. Thomas, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
This is something that kind of transcends, because everybody has a guilty pleasure. It can come in so many different shapes and forms. But what is it about guilty pleasures? Why do we reward ourselves with these little tokens? What's going on there in the mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is such a contradiction. Something brings us pleasure, but then also we feel this whole sense of guilt about it. What is it that's going on? And it is often, something to do with, both the pleasure and the guilt. This pleasure produces wonderful feelings in our brain.
Yeah, chemicals
all these chemicals come, and there's this flood of chemicals, and we feel this is great. But then, we want that little bit more, and so we do it again, and there's, a little bit, but not as much, and then we want some more, and we're trying to just kind of keep up, but we never can, and then eventually, we kind of run dry in our minds.
I'm glad you mentioned minds there, because I kind of imagine a seesaw when I think of my own mind, and you can overload one side, you can push it back to balance, but it's always going to kind of flop back. What is actually happening in the brain with this guilty pleasure, little war that's raging back and forth?
I mean, a seesaw is a really, really helpful analogy, actually, because, it's kind of trying to push down on a seesaw, and it goes back a bit, and then you push down. And, after kind of pushing down constantly on that kind of seesaw lever...
There's 900 kilograms of chocolate on the other side of the seesaw. Yeah.
Exactly. To kind of get it back up takes a really, really long while. And so our brains are built on balance. And so we can't kind of keep on pushing them right towards pleasure, because eventually the balance will have to come back. And so we can do it kind of for a while, but eventually it catches up with us.
Often when it's too late, we realize these things. So what are those warning signs, or what should we be aware of when rewarding ourselves with these little guilty pleasures, which I'm not saying isn't, sometimes it can turn your day around. Just the right cuppa, the right little bite of chocolate. I get hangry, so it often helps me in those critical moments. But when do we know it's too much?
Exactly, and there is kind of really that fine line. So, I mean, there's a couple questions that can be really helpful to ask. I mean, I think one of the ones to ask is this something that is harmful? And, that can be a tricky one, because we're very good at rationalizing this. We'll kind of say,
confirmation bias.
Exactly, that confirmation bias. No, it is good for me, and we find all the evidence to support that. But is it actually harmful? And sometimes you have to look outside. Is it taking me away from other joys, other obligations, other responsibilities? The people around us might tell us. Is it something we feel we don't have control over? We kind of try to stop it, or we've tried to make attempts, and probably some of us know about this, We've tried to kind of make that attempt to stop it, but we feel like, we really just can't control that craving, that itch. That's another good sign.
And it's often when we're at our lowest, when you don't have the strength and all of those things, that's when we fall back on these little guilty pleasures.
Absolutely.
Just to get us through the night, just to get us going in the day. Anyone who's walked through that final aisle of a shopping center with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old child will feel the societal pressure that is stepping in. But that comes in many shapes and forms as well.
Absolutely.
How do our surroundings and where we are and those kind of societal pressures play a part in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess it can be for better or for worse. Obviously there is that sense of judgment. Sometimes that's why we feel the guilt over something that's maybe a harmless pleasure, and we just feel people would judge us for this, but, it's maybe just good fun and fine for us. But, I mean, on the other side, I guess, is that, there are social norms for a reason. And so sometimes...
Governors, yeah.
Exactly, and the guilty pleasures often happen in secret. So sometimes, thinking about what do other people think can be really useful too.
Yeah, you can plug into the collective. Dori, most of us are people close to us who will tell us if we are crossing that line, especially if you're married, which is, I rely on that completely, so I'm all for that. In an effort to be proactive and practical, because often we think too much about these things and then it feels like, wow, I can't go back and solve all my childhood problems, so I'm just going to keep eating chocolate. It doesn't have to be that big. It doesn't have to be a mountain, just a step. So what's the first step in trying to find balance? How do we govern ourselves?
I think just taking stock of what the issue is, so just starting there. Sometimes it's such a hidden and secret pleasure, that we don't know how much we're doing it. And just starting with, okay, I'm going to just keep track. How much is this a problem? When am I doing it? And then, then that can lead kind of to, okay, what can I do about it? But just that first step of, okay, I'm going to actually look at the problem, face it, and
be
then...
conscious.
Yeah, just to be conscious.
Put yourself in
exactly.
it. That being said, be conscious for us right now. What's your guilty pleasure? Is there something that you often have to think a little bit about before you indulge?
I can definitely say chocolate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's one of those ones, I can really convince myself about it. I'm having a bad day, I just need that energy boost, and then, it sometimes becomes just one too many pieces, and I feel,
I have the same thing with one particular brand of chocolate, and it's an international brand, so it's ridiculously expensive. I will buy a value pack so I can eke it out and finish it in the car before I'm home, so I don't have to show my family. Yes, okay, we all have a guilty pleasure. Luckily, it is World Chocolate Day, so you're okay today,
we're
buddy.
safe today.
We'll see if we can whip you up something special in our kitchen just a moment. But those guilty pleasures, I think it's something to be aware of, to know the power of what it can do positively, but be conscious about those negative repercussions. And if you're battling to understand, just ask your wife or someone close to you. They'll lay it down for you.